Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guests, Mary Robinette Kowal and Sam J. Miller, whose stories are joined together in a Saga Double. Mary Robinette's is Apprehension, and Sam J. Miller's is Red Star Hustle. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Worldshapers, the podcast where I talk to other authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and I'm not only the host, I'm an author myself, author of, as I usually say, more than 60 books of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction for readers of all ages. My most recent new novel is called Fireboy. It's a middle grade fantasy adventure, modern day, set in a small town in Alberta where the main character's grade 7 science class disappeared in the last school year on a field trip that she wasn't on because of food poisoning. And she's obviously dealing with that as she's heading into grade 8. And then her best friend who was on that trip shows up in her campfire when she's out camping with her dad, made entirely of flame, hence the title, Fireboy. And she has to join forces with another girl who was on that trip but didn't disappear. She was found unconscious on the bus, buried under a lot of camping equipment. And they have to figure out what was going on and how their teacher tied into it, because he did not disappear either, but he was unconscious. And they have to figure out what's going on. And there's a lot of adventure and magic and all that good stuff. So that's Fireboy. It's out from Shadowpaw Press, which is my own publishing company. And another recent release is from, which I just put out a new edition of because it's been a long time since it was out, is The Dark Unicorn here. It's a young adult fantasy adventure. It was my second novel, came out in the 90s, and was a finalist for Best Children's Literature at the Saskatchewan Book Awards in 1999. And it's out now in a new edition, ebook and print, and you can find it everywhere. Okay, that's me. I should also mention a bit more about Shadowpaw Press, because there are some other titles in there that have just come out. There's a new poetry collection, First Light, Last Light, by Glenn Sorstad, who was the first poet laureate of Saskatchewan. He's one of Canada's elder statesmen when it comes to poetry, a recipient of the Order of Canada. So I have his new poetry collection, Shadowpaw Press just published. There's also a collection of short fiction by Harriet Richards. This is a reprint called Waiting for the Piano Tuner to Die, a highly acclaimed short fiction collection that came out a couple of decades ago, and now it's out in a new edition. And then coming up, I have another short fiction collection, New Stories by Betty Jane Hegarat, a Calgary author. And I also have a reprint of my Daw fantasy novel, Magebane, coming out through Endless Sky Books, like Dark Unicorn there. And I'm looking forward to that. It's under the pseudonym Lee Arthur Chane. It's a standalone fantasy novel. There are such things. And I'm looking forward to having it back out available for people to read again. Okay, that is definitely enough about me and Shadowpaw Press. Let's talk about our two guests. I'll put on my reading glasses so I can read their bios. And one of them has been on before. Mary Robinette Kowal is the author of the best-selling Lady Astronaut Universe, The Spare Man, Ghost Talkers, and the Glamorous History series. She's part of the award-winning podcast Writing Excuses and a 4-time Hugo Award winner. Her short fiction appears in Uncanny, Tor, and Asimov's. Mary Robinette, a professional puppeteer, lives in Denver. Sam J. Miller's books have been called must-reads and bests of the year by USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, National Public Radio, and Oprah Daily, among others, and have been translated into 9 languages. They've also been banned in Florida and stolen by AI. His work has won the Nebula, Locus, Shirley Jackson, and Subjective Chaos kind of awards, as well as the Astounding Award. He's also the last in a long line of butchers. Sam lives in New York City. And let's meet Sam and Mary Robinette now. So, Mary Robinette and Sam, welcome to the Worldshapers.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Yes, you were on. I was just looking it up just before we got on, and I think you were episode 41, and I believe this is episode 202 or 203. You'd think I could remember. I just looked it up. But anyway, it's somewhere along in there. So it has been a while. But nice to have you back. And Sam, we haven't met before, so nice to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. And I will ask each of you to tell me about yourselves, where you come from, and how you got doing this strange thing where you make up stuff for money. So, Mary Robinette, tell us about yourself.
Sure. So I am, besides being a science fiction and fantasy writer, I come into it from live theater. I did about 20 years of puppetry as my day job.
Mhm.
I'm also an audiobook narrator. I have a small cat who talks using buttons, which has affected the way I write science fiction now, because I'm having conversations with a non-human intelligence on a daily basis, which came into play in Apprehension, where we have some non-human intelligences.
So what got you started writing, though? What, going way,
I
way
don't
back?
remember a time that I didn't write. I literally don't remember a time. One of my earliest memories, which I know is in kindergarten, um, it was writing a story for my mom for Mother's Day. And I'm certain that that was not the first story I wrote. Um, when this change to writing as the career rather than puppetry came about because I had a severe puppet injury. um, and was in a cast for about a year in physical therapy for close to another year after that. And during that time, I had started writing again. Like I was had started writing again, like a thing for my niece and nephew, and remembered, oh, I really enjoyed this. But what I realized was that I had been getting all my creative jollies from puppet design and construction, and that without that in my life, I needed another outlet. And I was like, oh yeah, I used to really enjoy this whole writing thing. And then because had spent my entire life in the arts, my mom was an arts administrator, my instinct was, well, how do you monetize this? And so I started submitting and taking workshops, and it slowly transitioned over to here.
Why science fiction? What specifically drew you to that?
Again, I don't remember a time where science fiction wasn't part of my life. Like early childhood memories was listening to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on the radio with my dad. Early, like I was watching Doctor Who. So a significant part of it is it's just what I like, but the rest of it is the same thing that drew me to puppetry, which is that it is the theater of the possible. Anything that you think about that is impossible in mimetic fiction becomes possible. And that allows you to take the natural world, kind of tip it to its side, look at the connective pieces, and think about how you fit into that shape.
Now, Sam, let's talk about you. And where did you come from and grow up and get started with storytelling?
Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York. My father was a butcher. His father was a butcher. I was a butcher. When I turned 12, my father grabbed me and took me to work with him and put me to work and trained me as a butcher. But our butcher shop closed when I was 16. Yeah, I had a lot of very angry feelings about capitalism and all sorts of things. And so sort of like became an angry young activist. And so I spent 15 years as a community organizer in New York City. And my origin story as a writer really is rooted in just sort of like profound feelings of loneliness and need for external validation and attention. I also sort of like, don't remember. I mean, I wrote from a very early age, and my mom, who is an amazing writer who got published and won some awards in the 80s, when I was 12 years old, she taught me how to do a cover letter and a self-addressed stamped envelope. So I actually started submitting to Asimov's and the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction when I was 12. And it only took me like 22 years to get into Asimov's and 28 years to get into the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. So yeah, I was really fortunate to have that resource in-house and to sort of like, I mean, I remember getting like personalized, thoughtful rejections at 12 from FNSF, including like telling me I needed to like you're not getting like chiding me for my stories not getting better, like being like this is just like the last one. That's really, I realize now that's really special and surprising. So yeah, always been doing it. Really gravitated towards science fiction largely because my brain doesn't really understand genre. Like my first love stories was horror. Like I've always loved horror movies and books, and my mom was a big horror movie fan, so she would let me see movies that I absolutely should not have seen because she really wanted to see them. And in my brain, like there's no real difference between like horror and science fiction. These are just the things that make my brain explode. So I write both horror and science fiction and other genres. And in my brain, it's all this big stew of like, what gets me excited? And so often I think I write something thinking it's one genre and it's not at all, because my understanding of the genre does not align to the general sense of it, I guess.
Well, ultimately, genre is a publishing fiction, I guess you would say. It just tells them where to put stuff on the bookshelves. And with online bookstores, there's much more smearing of that, I think, depending on what keywords you decide to put in and all that sort of thing. Well, let's talk about the books. I have a hard time talking about this because it's a Saga Double, and that quite startled me. I did not know they existed until this crossed my plate here. And of course, what I remember, and probably you both do too, are the Ace doubles.
Yeah.
Short novels back to back. I had several of those as a kid and read a lot of those. I don't remember any specific story I read in one of those, but I certainly remember that flipping the thing over and getting the different story on the other side. Is the Saga Double something that they were consciously hearkening back to those, do you think?
Yeah, from conversations that I've had with Joe Monti, the editor-in-chief of Saga, he also grew up with the Ace doubles, and so for the 10th anniversary of Saga, they wanted to do something really special, and so they brought in the Saga Double, which is this great format where it flips over. And the thing that I love about it is you finish one book and then you get to flip it over and get the joy of starting a new book like immediately, which is so much fun.
It's kind of weird too. You have they're printed, one is upside down relative to the other one. So
yeah. So there's no doubt when you reach the end of one book either.
Oh, the text has gone the other way. That must be the end. Well, tell me about, I guess we'll start with Mary Robinette again. Tell me about your story in this double.
Sure. So Apprehension is sort of my nod to Hitchcock. I jokingly call it Hitchcock in space. But basically, it's the story of Bonnyjean. She's a 78-year-old neurosurgeon grandma who's on vacation with her family, trying to get over the loss of her child. So she's traveling with her son-in-law and grandson, and she takes them to a planet where she had been a soldier 40 years previously, and gets accidentally caught up in a terrorist plot when her grandson is kidnapped, and has to pull on a lot of skills that she has not used and does not have the body to use anymore. So it's dealing with grief, it's dealing with PTSD, but it's also dealing with, there's a little bit of humor there, and it's pretty. I think it's pretty poppy in terms of. It's not a total downer, despite the way I just described it.
I think I saw in the description, she's having to deal with a bad hip and things like that.
Yeah,
which as I was saying before we started, that I broke my ankle 2 months ago and was hobbling around with a walker for 6 weeks with no weight bearing, and I suddenly have a much greater appreciation for what happens as you get into that era when your body is not working as well as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to find it in a science fiction adventure heroine.
Yeah, and it's like she is in an action. I mean, she's in a Hitchcock suspense action thriller, but she's 78 years old and she has an arthritic hip.
And Sam, your story is Red Star Hustle. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Red Star Hustle is me trying and failing to write something really fun and pulpy and action-packed. I've written some really, heavy stuff. My last novel, The Blade Between, was like a horror story about gentrification, and it's just some real like heavy stuff happens. And so I really wanted to write something fun and like outer space, shoot 'em up, big battles with mech fighters, and wormholes, and all, like just sort of like the most science fiction that I've ever been. And of course, I failed and ended up like going to all the places that my stuff always goes, which is like there's like heartbreak and addiction struggles and resistance and oppression and exploitation, and it might be still fun, I think.
It is still, I'm just going to jump in here. I'm like, you keep saying that you failed at this. You totally succeeded at writing something that is science fiction, fun pulp romp that is also dealing with addiction and heartbreak.
Thank you. So yeah, it's about a happy-go-lucky rent boy, possibly 10,000 years in the future, when wormholes have allowed us to travel and expand throughout 90 trillion planets and space stations, and he is framed for murder of one of his famous clients. Is on the run, is trying to clear his name, but the complications are that he falls for the clone of a puppet monarch who is trying to bring down his evil father / original. And he is also being pursued by a bounty hunter who is pretty sure he's innocent, but doesn't have the luxury of caring, and so is gonna bring him in at any cost, because if she fails to bring in her bounty, then her mom's gonna start looking and realize that she's living a horrible lie and she's keeping a really messed up secret.
Well, you kind of said what you were trying to do when you set out to do this, but this is going to be the question that I always try to avoid framing in the obvious way, because nobody likes the question, where do you get your ideas? So I'm going to say, what was the seed from which this blossomed?
For me, one of my favorite filmmakers is Pier Paolo Pasolini, a great Italian filmmaker, outspoken queer artist and political artist, who was murdered in circumstances that were framed as like a rent boy encounter gone wrong, where he was murdered by a sex worker. But there's a lot of evidence that it was an assassination, because his films were really political and dangerous to people, to a lot of politicians and powerful people. And so I've spent a long time wanting to write that story somehow, not the story of Pier Paolo Pasolini, but a story about a rent boy assassination, murder framing. So it took me about 15 years to get to it, and 10,000 years in the future.
Is that kind of typical of your idea generation process? Is drawing on those sorts of real life things that impact on you in some way, and then you turn it into a science fiction or horror story? Yeah,
I definitely have a notes document where I just save like I just learned that yesterday in my reading that like the only animal that humans took with them when they crossed the Bering Straits land bridge into the Americas was the dog. No pigs, no cows, no horses, none of that. And so the only animal that was domesticated that humans took with, so that's like so cool. That's like such a cool fact. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's in the file. And sometimes I get to the story or the novel in like a week, and sometimes it takes me a decade or two. But yes, I get excited by weird facts and fascinating stories, and they go in the bin.
And Mary Robinette, what was the seed for this story?
So like Sam, I also start with a filmmaker, which was Hitchcock. I was trying to get a better understanding of how Hitchcock handled suspense. And so I was doing kind of a really deep dive into Hitchcock films. People who read this will definitely recognize some things from The Man Who Knew Too Much, because it was a heavy influence. And I mashed it up with something that was happening in my real life at the time, which was my mom was having hip surgery to have her hip replaced. And the thing that was so striking about it was the difference in the way people treated her before the hip became a problem and after. And it's like with mom in particular, she had arthritis, but it was actually what was happening with her was, I can't remember what it's called, but basically this is a thing that can happen. Apparently the bone, like part of your bone can just die. And so her hip bone had just died, which was why it was so painful and why it happened so fast. So, but it was really interesting because she was still the capable driving force of nature that she'd always been, but now she had this hip situation, and then she also had something that's called anesthesia-induced confusion, which they had told us that your mom might be confused when she comes out of surgery, and I thought it's going to be like Mom is high, and she for about 10 days had what felt like sudden onset Alzheimer's. You would leave the room and she would not remember that you'd been there. She was hallucinating things. It was a wild, crazy ride. And so,
yeah, my mom
so all of those things kind of mashed up into this novel.
So this being a double, were you writing for the Saga Double line, or were you writing a novel, and how did that all come about? How did you end up with these two books put together?
That's we have the same agent, which is helpful. I wrote mine actually in 2017, and we couldn't figure out what to do with it because it's an odd length. And
how long is it?
It is 39,999 words at this point, because I have and like I feel like for writers this is good to know. My contract with Tor says that they get first look at my next adult novel of science fiction, and a novel begins at 40,000 words. So this is 39,999 words long. I think it's actually like 39,864 words, but you get the idea.
That must have taken some very careful editing.
Yes. Every time I added something, I had to take something else out.
How long?
So I wrote mine not having any idea that Saga Doubles would be a thing. Sam?
Yeah, first of all, like all of your moves, Mary Robinette, that is a boss move. Like a 39,999 word. Yes, brilliant. You remain my idol in all things. So I actually part of the reason that I keep saying that I failed with this book is because I did write it as a novel that like went out on submission and totally failed to sell, which hadn't happened in a while. It had happened many times. I wrote my debut novel, The Art of Starving, was actually my 7th novel. I wrote 6 novels that failed to sell before that. But then I sold 4 novels in a row, and I thought, okay, I'm done with the struggle. But the struggle was not done with me, and Red Star Hustle didn't sell. And Joe Monti at Saga was one of the folks who passed on it. And then like 6 months later, he reached out to Seth, our agent, and said, is that still available? And I guess the Saga Double concept was taking shape, and Joe thought it would be a good fit. And it did require it was like a 86,000 word novel, and getting it down to 55,000 words was a joy. Although I do think
big cut.
Yeah, I do think it's much stronger for it. It lost a lot of things that were great for me, but maybe weren't so great for the book. So I not only do I love the Ace doubles, but I actually also remember Tor had a series of doubles.
Oh, I don't remember that.
In like the 80s, I think, that were often like older things, like novellas from like the 1960 something Hugos. So yeah, I don't know why everyone doesn't do this. It's such an awesome concept. It's you get 2 books for one. They're short, so they're fun and quick, and every publisher should have doubles. The only complication I've seen so far is in Goodreads reviews, because you can only review one. Like, you have to give it a 5-star review. And what if you thought that, Apprehension was a 5-star book and Red Star Hustle was a 3-star book? Do you give it a 4? Whatever. These are minor troubles, I think.
And also not a problem that's going to happen.
So clearly you didn't know that your books were going to be put together when you were writing this. Do you think that they make an interesting combination?
Yeah, when once we knew that they were going together, Sam reached out and said, what do you think about putting Easter eggs in for?" And so I like to say they aren't in the same universe, but they're flirting with each other.
Yeah, it was actually eerie to me how when I read Apprehension, I was like, oh, like they fit together very well. It's like crime stories in space. They're in the future. I think there's like a noir vibe that's sort of like the Hitchcock influence that is sustainable across both. I think the cover art really does a great job of sort of like putting them together. So it's an eerily good fit, I think.
Yeah.
Did you have the same editor for both books? So one editor was looking after the entire double.
Yeah.
And did that feed into the editing in any way?
We had the same editor. I don't know if it fed into it. I don't know if he was asking us to make tweaks specifically so that they would mesh better.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think
aside from maybe pushing up the noir aspect of it, but that's the only thing I can think of.
I suppose the editorial decision in the first place to put the two books together, somebody there said these will work together. How many of these doubles are there? Do you have any idea?
There are 3.
So it's a fairly new program.
Yeah. So the first one is an anthology edited by Ellen Datlow, who's one of my very favorite editors of short fiction. She's the editor whose name I recognized before I even thought about writing as a career thing. And so it's a day on one side and night on the other. So it's themed on each side. And then the next one is 2 novellas or short novels by Stephen Graham Jones. So same writer, 2 books. And then I think they're experimenting with form to see how it works. And so we're 2 different authors, same book.
And what was the I guess the process for each of you? What is the process for rewriting? And you went down to 39,999 words, and Sam, you had to cut yours a lot. Are you writers who like the initial writing process, or is the revision where you think the magic really happens?
Both.
Both.
And both. Yeah.
I talked to some authors who, they just, I talked to, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Alan Bradley. He writes the Flavia de Luce series.
Oh, yes. I love those so much.
Yeah, I talked to him yesterday. He's from, he started writing here in Saskatchewan when he was at the University of Saskatchewan up in Saskatoon. So we kind of had a connection. And anyway, but he says for him, Flavia just dictates the story to him. And there's very little revision after that. And I've talked to authors who are like that. And for me, I find that I do pretty much everything happens in the first draft, but then I do some revising. I've never had to cut 30,000 words out of something, though. That's not just a line here or there.
Right. I mean, I think that I love them both, but really differently. Like, I love writing. I love the process of creating something. I love the way my mind works when I'm writing like a big project, like a novel, like the way that like everything, like I'm on the subway, everything I see is like, oh, could that go in the book? Oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, that outfit is fascinating. That random thing that person just said on the subway is fascinating. That article I just read about, Ukrainian astronomy in diaspora since the conflict started is fascinating. And then I struggle initially with revising because, especially in the context of like an agent, an editor, a beta reader giving feedback on what needs to happen, because there's always the part where I'm like, but it's perfect. What do you mean? So once my hurt feelings subside, which usually takes about like 11 to 12 milliseconds, I get really into it and I get really excited about the process of like, remembering that I'm just one brain with profound limitations. And it's such a gift to have an external brain's separate second brain's input. So yeah, I do ultimately really love revising, even if it hurts my feelings at first.
I will say that I do go through the defensive phase sometimes as well. But I think that part of what my framing, but coming out of live theater, is, it's always collaborative. And so the process of working with an editor or beta readers also feels like a collaborative process. And that my job as a writer is to hack the human brain, to cause you to feel an emotion, to cause you to think about things. And the only way I can tell if it's working is if I hand it to someone. And then it's just like, I think the other thing for me is coming out of the arts, you're always iterating. And so I'm like, this is just iterating and dialing it in closer. But I love the initial flush of discovery. And even when I'm planning, like Sam, I'm constantly seeing things around me that I'm like, how does that fit in? Or I need something here. What is something that I've experienced that I can slot in? So yeah, it's both for me.
There's nothing like the like profound gratitude I get when someone gives me really good feedback. Like when someone has read it and understood something and shares something that rocks my world and helps me understand A, what's working, and B, what's not working, or what could be different, or contextualizes it in relationship to other work in a way that I hadn't known. Like there's nothing like that. And that does really sort of bring home, as much as we are sort of programmed to think of writing as a solitary exercise of your one wild, precious brain doing crazy things. It's like we exist in community. We exist in community with other books, with other writers, with other people, and we're really at our best when we can engage that fully.
Now, the book is not quite out, I believe, as we do this recording, but it will be when this goes live.
Yay!
So, have you had some? There's usually early reviews and so forth. Have you been pleased with the response to your stories?
Yes.
So
Yeah, I have been. We've seen some, and what I really like is that the while people are sometimes on Goodreads, as Sam has noted, people are sometimes a little frustrated that they can't review them separately. The thing that I'm noting in them is that because they are reading them back to back, they are catching parallel themes in them. And I think that that's one of the really beautiful things about this format, is that that you do see, it makes you have this opportunity to broaden themes, and that's, I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is the time when my unwell practice of obsessively self-Googling is at its most productive. And so, yes, seeing people talk about it, seeing people on TikTok sharing that, that they got the book, talking about it is amazing. My harshest critic is my husband. He's not my harshest critic. He is everyone's harshest critic, and he will never give you a participation trophy. He will give you a 2-star rating if you deserve a 2-star rating, even if you're married to him.
Marry the same man?
What's that?
Did we marry the same man?
No, but it might be the secret of both of our success.
Right.
Or one key facet of it. So yeah, he's really enjoying it. He said unprompted to someone, yeah, it's really fun. So I was like, oh, it's really fun.
Wow.
So yeah, he often doesn't read my work until it's published, but I had the ARC lying around, and he started reading it. So
do you ever find that reviewers and readers find things in the books that you didn't realize were there, but when they say that they saw this, you think, oh yeah, this always reminds me of, there's a famous story, I think it was an Opus 100 by Isaac Asimov, where he was at some would have been in New York, because he hardly went anywhere else, at a university, and they were teaching Nightfall, and he listened to him, and afterwards he went up to the professor and he said, well, that's very interesting, but I'm Isaac Asimov and I wrote the story and I didn't put any of that stuff in there. And the professor said, well, I'm very glad to meet you, but just because you wrote it, what makes you think you know what's in it?
Yeah.
So have you had that experience of feedback that kind of surprises you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And like, again, coming out of puppetry specifically. So with puppetry, the puppet only exists because the audience agrees that it is alive. So the audience is a collaborator. And so my approach to my own fiction is that half of the book is created by the reader. I'm relying on them to build pictures in their head. I'm relying on them to carry all of the scenery with them and the continuity. Like, I'm relying on them to do a lot of things, to interpret and feel emotions that are just words on a page when they leave me. And they create all of that in their own body. Mm. So I always think of it as a collaborative process. So I am sometimes surprised by what they find, but I am unsurprised that they find things.
Yeah, I love it. I love people think I'm much smarter than I am, or they find references and allusions that I didn't know about, and sometimes they are like, oh, I'm like, oh yeah, that is a ripoff of that Stephen King book that I absolutely did read when I was 13, and so yes, that probably is a subconscious or unconscious plagiarism. I mean, influence. The only time that I ever when prompted or when something is shared with me, that I'll challenge it is like somebody wrote a whole thing about how my novel, The Art of Starving, was like influenced by this musical I had never heard of and never seen. And so in that case, I had to be like, no, I actually don't. That is a incidental overlap, not an intentional one. But yes, normally I cop to my plagiarism, my influence, my theft, my adoption, and appreciate when folks spot it or spot things that I didn't intend, but that doesn't make them less valid.
Yeah, I have had that experience too, where people have like, this is just like, I'm like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
And what are you both working on now? Mary Robinette?
I am completing a novelette that is for a really interesting project called Proxima Cosmos, which is pairing planetary scientists, xenobiologists, and science fiction writers to create and explore plausible scientific worlds, science fictional worlds. And so I am in the last two, I'm calling them chapters, but last two chapters of this novelette. So that's what I'm working on right now. Hopefully I will not be working on it when I see Sam.
And Sam?
I am doing my best not to start another big project. There are several things that really want to be next big projects, and I'm like, it is not the moment to write a new novel. I did just finish a werewolf novel, which I'm really excited about, but I'm letting that chill for a bit, let it get to room temperature before I sip it and see what's next with it. But yeah, mostly trying to keep things in short story boxes that keep wanting to like climb out into novelette boxes and then novella boxes and then eventually novel boxes.
And where can everybody keep track of each of you online? Sam?
I'm at samjmiller.com. I have a website. I just recently started a newsletter called Undercover in the Apocalypse, which is sort of like an epistolary ongoing science fiction story as an embedded operative in the middle of our present apocalypse. I'm on all the socials. I'm sam.j.miller at Instagram. And when I say all the socials, I mean, I'm not really on them. I'm trying my best not to be on them.
Likewise, I'm on most of the socials, at least somewhat. But the easiest thing to do is to go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, which will keep you up to date on all the things. And it's maryrobinettekowal.com. And in addition to my newsletter, like when the newsletter arrives, not only does it tell you what I've got going on, you also get a picture of my cat, Elsie, who's adorable. And I will send you a short story on when you sign up, and then another one on your birthday.
I actually named my publishing company Shadowpaw Press after my cat. So,
that's so sweet.
His picture's on every book, but he's absolutely no help whatsoever. Just literally a figurehead. So, well, thank you both so much for being on the Worldshapers. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did as well. And best of luck with the. It doesn't have a title on its own, does it? It's the two together.
Yeah, we should have a collective title.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, we should work on that.
Yeah. Huh. Too late for this though. So anyway, thanks so much for being on, and best of luck with the release.
Thank you so much for having us.
And thanks again to Mary Robinette and Sam for being on for the second time in the case of Mary Robinette. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did as well. That brings us to the end of another episode of the Worldshapers. I'll just go through the usual end of the show stuff. You can find the Worldshapers online at theworldshapers.com. You can find it on X at the Worldshapers, and you can find it on Facebook at the Worldshapers. You can find me, which I'm sure you want to do, at edwardwillett.com. You can find me on X at ewillett, on Instagram at edwardwillettauthor, on Facebook at edward.willett, and of course on YouTube, which you very much might be on at this moment if you're watching this podcast, and not just listening to it, at youtube.com/edwardwillett, where among other things you can walk around my home city of Regina with me, and I hope to be doing that again soon. I'm back on my feet after breaking my ankle, but not 100% yet, so I haven't taken any long walks, but I do hope to get back to it sometime soon. You can find my publishing company, Shadowpaw Press, at shadowpawpress.com. You can find it on X at Shadowpaw Press, on Instagram at Shadowpaw Press, and on Facebook at Shadowpaw Press. And if you are interested in Shadowpaw Press titles, there are a lot in a lot of different genres, so I really would urge you to go to the website, shadowpawpress.com, and see everything that I've published so far, with some exciting stuff coming, including Robert J. Sawyer's sequel to last year's The Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine. I brought out the print edition of that last year, of the first Downloaded last year, and I have the second one will be coming out in 2026, and also bringing out a new edition of his alternate history science fiction novel, The Oppenheimer Alternative, which I'm looking forward to bringing out as well. So those are two of my major releases coming up next year, but there's many others that will be coming along, and I hope you'll check out Shadowpaw Press, and you can also join the Shadowpaw Press mailing list and get the newsletter on a regular basis whenever there's something new out. You can also join my newsletter as well. Both are on Substack. Okay, that's probably enough. So thanks again for watching not the newsletter. Thanks again for watching The Worldshapers, and I hope to see you back here again next time. Bye for now.